Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We're gathered today on the 11th of January, 2025, on the Gregorian calendar, which happens to line up with the second of the 11th month on our Creator's calendar. And we're continuing with our reading of the book of Exodus. It should be the last week that we are on it until we switch over to the book of Yobelim, or Jubilees, if you will, because when you look at the internal text of the book itself, it is mentioned that the entire book is given to Moshe, dictated from or to the messenger of the presence there, who in the course of the writing I come to find out, or you all should see, that it is our Mashiach who's speaking to him. But the book of Yobelim is given on the 16th day of the third month, the day after he gives the 10 commandments and does what we're about to read right here. So before we get started, I wanted to show you a little bit of what we have going on. There's quite a bit missing from the Masoretic version of the Hebrew and the Septuagint version, the Greek version of the Hebrew text that was originally there. You can see from both the Brenton Septuagint and the KJV, which follows the Masoretic text, that they're almost identical, and you can take the time to pause and read through it at your leisure. They pretty much stay in sync with one another. Right, word for word. Now, right here, this is one of the first major sections that has something missing. And you can see right here, there's a large section of it. Right here from chapter 21, or sorry, from chapter 20 here of the book of Exodus, right after the 10 commandments were given, there's a whole section here missing. Now you can pause and read through this part at your leisure. We're going to read it in a different area together, so it's all one flowing part, but I wanted you to see for yourself the area that was missing. It is included in the book of Deuteronomy when Moshe is, before he passes away, and it's been 40 years in the wilderness, and the children are going to be going into the land. I believe, I don't know if it might be in the Bible itself. It could be just in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but I believe it mentions it was the 11th month when he gathered them together and was staying all that stuff before he passed away. And then they went in, where they went in on the first of the year, and they circumcised themselves, and they kept the Passover in the land there with the grain instead of having the manna fall. So all of that's recorded. But anyways, this part is mentioned then, specifically that he's going to send one like him in their midst that they should listen to. But it's not, it's removed from the part that we have here in chapter 20. And that's right, you can see this section. So I do encourage you, if you want, take the time to pause it here, read these sections for yourself. We're going to reread it right now in a version that I put together quite a while ago, okay? So right here on Facebook, this was from August, what is it? Sorry about that. August 16th, 2015, right? This is just a Facebook post. I put this meme here, and you have the 10 commandments that are written in what they call Paleo Hebrew. From everything that I've learned, it may have been, and I don't know if it was because Ron Wyatt called them differently than what we use today, but I've heard that the 10 commandments that he took out of the Ark of the Covenant were either written in the Paleo Hebrew, like this text, or what he called Proto-Canaanite. Now, what he meant by that, I'm not certain, but I did hear him in interviews say that, and I have heard others say both. I don't remember if I heard him say paleo itself, but he may have. It's just not familiar with me. So I'm not overly dogmatic. I tend to believe that this is the writing font that was used, because this is the alphabet that every language that comes from the Hebrew still uses today. They say it's the Romance alphabet. It came from Latin, but a Latin adopted the ancient Greek characters, which were Phoenician Hebrew. And it was this writing right here. So that is a fact. Whether or not it was a previously Proto-Canaanite or the pictorial pictures and how that was, or if that was a de-evolution, then it went back. I can't say for certain, but I'm trying to be honest about what is said or what was written. So this may be the accurate font, it may not, but the point's the same. Brother Ron mentions that it has the Ten Commandments written front and back. So you can see that the first 10 were written on one, and the second, or I'm sorry, the first five written on one, and the second five written on the other, front and back. So they repeated themselves. You can flip them over and still read the same commandments over again. That's what he seemed to say, if I remember correctly. Other than that, he didn't give a description of the stones or anything of that, other than quoting what was in scripture, which the first set of stones were given from the Almighty. And he says he doesn't know if they were blue or whatever color, but the second set of stones were taken from out of the mountain, from where he was, made like the first. And then he wrote on those as well. And that is in scripture for anyone that wants to see. Now, I tend to use this version, and I highly encourage you to please check its authenticity. Use an interlinear, check out a Tanakh if you have it and you're familiar with the Hebrew. Get a Strong's Concordance if you need, or use an online reference with the interlinear where you can have the hyperlinks for your ease of use. But some of this is not going to sound like what you're familiar with. I took the literal translations and not just what is commonly translated. In particular, you'll find that the third commandment is a little different from what you might remember. This is the common scriptures, Exodus 21 through 16, 22 through 26, and the Samaritan and Dead Sea Scrolls. The Samaritan Pentateuch from the same verses, and then the Dead Sea Scrolls from scroll 4Q22, column 21, Exodus 20, and that's 17 through 21. And all of that's going to cover the parts that you just saw in that white PDF. It says, and Elohim spoke all these words, saying, Anoki Yahuwah Elohika. Right? So Anoki, I am, is how that's translated, but literally Anok is a plumb line, and Anoki is literally my plumb line. If you remember in Amos, where he's giving a vision to him, and he says that he's on a wall, and he set his plumb line on it, and that's the standard by which everyone's going to be judged. That plumb line is who he is right here in his 10 commandments. But it says, Anoki, Yahuwah Elohika. I am Yahuwah your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, or confinement of the waters, right? Out of the house of slavery. You have no other mighty ones before my face, before or against my presence or my face. You do not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of that which is in the Shamayim above, or which is in the earth beneath, or which is in the waters beneath the earth. You do not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, and that's that Anoki, Yahuwah, your Elohim, am El Kana, which is a jealous El. There's two words that are Kana, Kuf Nun Aleph, which is the word for jealous, and then Kuf Nun He, Kana, which is to take or gain possession of, to acquire. So it's a very similar word, but it's different spellings and different meaning. It says, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, to the third and fourth of those who hate me, but showing loving kindness to Alphim, to thousands, to those who love me and guard my commands. This is not the first that I'm aware of, but it is the direct reference in the Ten Commandments that Loving him is guarding his commands. You do not lift up the Shem of Yahuwah your Elohim to Shwa. Now, or people say Shav as well here, or this is literally the word Shwa, which the schwa is the two dots that they would put underneath a letter as a half vowel. And that's literally what it's called. This is how it's spelled, the schwa. And it's what he says, you do not bring or lift up his name to schwa. And they literally put that two-letter vowel point under the yod of his name. I just found that to be an kind of a little scary irony there, but it's a truth that is kind of pointing things out. Okay. What schwa means that you can look up in the definition is a lie, falsehood, vanity, ruin, or not, like nothing. You don't lift up his name to not, right? Or ruin. For Yahuwah does not cleanse or purify. It literally says to cleanse or purify. It's constantly quoted as he will not leave unpunished, but there is no word for punishment there. It's literally, he will not purify the one who brings Aleph Tau, his name, to Shwa, a lie, falsehood, vanity, ruin, or not. And if you pay careful attention, this is literally how reality works. Okay. Remember Yom HaShabbat to set him apart. Again, you can look at the Hebrew. There is no gender neutral. They say it in general English, they'll say it, or in Greek and other languages, they have a gender neutral. But in the Hebrew, there was not. It's always a masculine or a feminine. And in this instance, it's to set him apart, literally. And when you do that, it makes it makes sense in the context of who's being spoken of. The Aleph Tau, the one giving the covenant here, right? But he says, remember Yom HaShabbat to set him apart. 6 Yamim, or days, you labor and shall do all your work. But the seventh is a Shabbat unto Yahuwah Elohika, Yahuwah your Elohim. You do not do any work. You, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your manservant or male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. And that includes your donkey, your ox. If you had a horse, whatever it is, your animals don't work for you, right? People will complain about the book of Yobelim, saying that it has added commandments that you can't ride your animals. But if you're not supposed to have your animals work, why would you have them labor under you? That's going contrary to what he said to do and not having them rest. So there is no contradiction when you take the time to think about what is actually being stated here. But it says, nor the stranger who is within your gates, for in 6 days Yahuwah made Eth the Shamayim and Eth the earth, Eth the sea and Eth Aleph Tau, right? All that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore Yahuwah Barak Eth the Shabbat, who Yahushua said he's the master of, right? Aleph Tau, the Shabbat day, and he set him apart. Esteem Eth your father, Wa'eth your mother, so that it is well with you and your days are prolonged upon the soil which Yahuwah your Elohim is giving you. And this very thing, these 10 commandments were what was written in stone in Los Lunas, New Mexico, that we had the video talking a little bit about. It was an abridged version. When we get the opportunity, or I believe we went over it in that video, but if we ever want to again, we can go over that one more in detail. It covers these generally, but it is not complete. Just it is generally all of these, but it doesn't have everything word for word is my point. It says, you do not murder, you do not commit adultery, you do not steal, you do not bear false witness against your neighbor, and you shall not covet your neighbor's house. The version in Deuteronomy puts your neighbor's wife first and then house. And I believe that was the order in a different area as well. I think that was the correct way it was supposed to be stated first, but this part in Exodus has house first. It says, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's. And when Yahuwah your Elohim will bring you to the land which you are going to inherit, you shall set up for yourselves large stones, and whitewash them with lime. You shall write on them all the words of this Torah, and when you have crossed over the Yarden, that on Mount Gerizim, you shall set up these stones, which I command you today, and there you shall build an altar to Yahuwah your Elohim, an altar of stones. You shall not use an iron tool on it or on them. You shall build them with whole stones, the altar of Yahuwah your Elohim, and offer burnt offerings on it to Yahuwah your Elohim. You shall offer shalom offerings, and shall eat there, and rejoice before Yahuwah your Elohim. That mountain is on the other side of the Yarden, toward the setting sun, in the land of the Canaanim, who dwell in the plain opposite Gilgal, beside the terebinth trees of Moreh. Now that was literally fulfilled when Yahushua brought them into the land, but it wasn't done until after 40 years from this point, when the whole generation of men that were circumcised, the men of battle, died because they were not obedient, if you recall. But right here, this is the instructions for what you can literally read that they did, where they set up the altar and then they put lime, or built the stone, they whitewashed it with lime, and they wrote the commandments on there, just like he said to. It says, now all the people witnessed the thunderings, the lightning flashes, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood afar off. Then they said to Moshe, surely Yahuwah, our Elohim, has shown us his esteem and his greatness, and we have heard his voice from the midst of the fire. We have seen this day that Elohim speaks with man, yet he still lives. Now therefore, why should we die? For this great fire will consume us if we hear the voice of Yahuwah our Elohim any more. Then we shall die. For who is there of all flesh who has heard the voice of the living Elohim speaking from the midst of the fire, as we have, and lived? You go near and hear all that Yahuwah our Elohim may say, and tell us all that Yahuwah our Elohim says to you. But and we will hear and do it. But let not Elohim speak with us, lest we die. And Moshe said to the people, do not fear, for Elohim is come to test you, and that his fear may be before you, so that you may not sin. So the people stood afar off, but Moshe drew near the thick darkness where Elohim was. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, I have heard the voice of the words of this people, which they have spoken to you. They are right in all that they have spoken. Oh, that they had such a heart in them, that they would fear me and always keep all my commandments, that it may be well with them and with their children forever. I will raise up for them a foreteller like you from among their brethren, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And it shall be that whoever will not hear his words, which he speaks in my name, I will require it of him. But the foreteller who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other mighty ones, that foreteller shall die. And if you say in your heart, how shall we know the word which Yahuwah has not spoken? When a foreteller speaks in the name of Yahuwah, if the thing does not happen or come to pass, that is the thing which Yahuwah has not spoken. The foreteller has spoken it presumptuously. You shall not be afraid of him. And that is the gist of it. You guys, if we only took this to heart and kept it in mind as we deal with what's going on around us, our lives would be so much better. If people presume to speak in his name and the thing they say doesn't happen, don't be afraid of them. Don't listen to them anymore. Fool me once, shame on me, right? Fool me twice, or shame on you, rather. Fool me twice, shame on me. So you don't listen to them anymore. So you have right here, what disqualifies someone is if they speak a thing and it in his name, in the name of Yahuwah, and that thing does not happen, or if they speak in the name of other mighty ones. And it doesn't mention whether or not that thing happens or not. If you guys recall, powers are allowed to be signs and wonders, in that there's a lot of things going on in the world today when it comes to the truth and the arguments and things contrary to the truth. The reason why they're allowed to stand is the same reason why the magicians were allowed to have their magic work, so that Pharaoh could have a choice to choose between witchcraft or the truth. Now, he chose poorly and suffered the consequences. We have those same options. We can choose to believe whatever we want. We can choose to believe what his word says in regard to how things are in reality, and we can conform ourselves accordingly, or we can believe whatever else opinion people might have. No, that's not the same as unanswered prayer. There's a difference, and that's gone over in the Shepherd of Hermas distinctly. If you haven't had your prayers answered just yet, you don't stop praying for what you want. He's either going to let you know the thing that you need to correct before it is given. He will let you know why that thing cannot be, or it will be in the course of time, and it's just your trial that you have to overcome, right? But that's separate of speaking in. This is another thing too. We're living in a time where many believers were in ignorance in regard to many things of what was true, the cosmology, the actual shape of creation, his name being hidden, but now being restored. At the time when we could not know his name, nescience, for example, it was not held against his people. Just like when Dawid could not know not to accumulate multiple wives because the book of the law was hidden in the Ark of the Covenant, it was not held against him. In the same way, now that his name is becoming known and the truth as it comes to you, how we receive that seed, he's given parables about that. Okay? But the truth is the word, and the truth is reality. When we learn about the word having his name changed, and we hear these things, and then we look into it and we find that it's true, or we confirm the reality of them with our mind, then we can know better, and we're required. But if you cast it away from you and say, I don't need to look, or he knows my heart, or whatever, then you've cast away the truth, and you reap that from that point forward, because you're not doing the investigation that is required by those that are following what his word says to do. So and that's the truth for everybody. When the truth is given to us, whether the messenger is of him or not, because like Shaul said, whether they give the Besorah in pretext or in truth, Mashiach is proclaimed, and in that he will rejoice. But how people give you the message, they'll have to answer for. How you receive that message, you yourself will have to answer for. And those are two different things. The more we can get that into heart, the more we as individuals will be careful about looking into the things that we hear to see if they're true, right? But right here, if anyone names the name of another mighty one, or if the thing he says doesn't come to pass, it's not of him, because he is the truth. He only speaks things that are. And those that follow him, he confirms their words with accompanying signs, right? You can find evidence for this in scripture. Look at the book of Acts, for example. Look at the foretellers, for example. And you can find the evidence for this in outside of scripture. I would give you John Todd's witness. I've mentioned him before. He was into generational witchcraft. He was a Collins. The Collinses were a family from the Caledonians, one of the most righteous branches of Hebrews that were wayward, that left before the exodus of Moshe, the righteous remnant that stayed true all the way until they got to their promised land. He, in the course of time, their family turned to generational witchcraft, and they were used by the Illuminati as part of the black nobility. They came over very early to America. But long story short, he was converted through fasting and prayer by fellowship of a Baptist preacher who didn't know our Messiah's name. He didn't keep the feast that I'm aware of. But with humility and through belief, him and a congregation not his own, he asked another pastor's congregation who would do so to fast and pray with them for the conversion of John Todd. And then he went over, and the things he spoke with authority and commanded, every bit of it happened. And he asked for some amazing things that are impossible for a man to accomplish on his own. But it was through the course of those actually being accomplished in John Todd's life, because he said it right to his face, that it helped convert him. And it was an amazing thing. But it's the very same our Father, through our Mashiach, working these signs for the people doing his will. It's an amazing thing. But he won't do that for people who are not. And that's the difference. That's how we are supposed to discern. This whole section's not here, but it is in Deuteronomy 13. However, it should have been in Exodus, because this is when it was originally given, as part of when our Mashiach was talking to him about who he was going to send, like unto Moshe. Uh, more to be more accurate there. The messenger of the presence was there, who I believe is the pre-incarnate form of our Mashiach. And our Father was speaking through him to Moshe. In the book of Yobelim, which we will get to, you'll see that sometimes he speaks from his own person, and sometimes he speaks from the Father through him. Like he directly says, he said this through me, right? Or this was sent to him from me. But we'll get there. So continue. It says, go and say to them, return to your tents, but as for you, stand here by me, and I will speak to you all the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments which you shall teach them, that they may observe them in the land which I am giving them to possess. The 10 Commandments right there, everything that we just read, what was literally spoken is the beginning of the common law as we comprehend it. But you can see here, it is not the only part, because the rest of what he was going to give him, commandments, statutes, and judgments, is the common law that he's going to be taught. Those are generally what we're about to read from chapters 21 through 23. There are a few of them in Leviticus and elsewhere, in regard to how a man should dress, and your beard, and things in relation to a man and woman's garments. But not all of those things are the original covenant. The reason why it matters how a man should dress or a woman should dress, for example, is due to adultery and lust and things that are mentioned more explicitly or in greater detail in the renewed covenant writings, like the apostolic constitutions. But the law was given here for that reason. It's just not given in detail, right? He doesn't explain himself. He just says, do it. But you'll see that in just a moment, or you'll see that as we read through them, what it is. Essentially, the common law is the meat and potatoes on how to love Yahuwah your Elohim with all of your heart, mind, body, being, and strength, and how to love your neighbor as yourself, on which all the commandments hang, right? Anything outside of that, not all of it, the feast, the dietary laws, those are continuing, but generally the things outside of that that were added because of the golden calf, the sacrificial system that was made mandatory, the purgation laws and things in regard to uncleanness, all of that was added afterwards. Those things are what was taken away in our Mashiach when the renewed covenant was given. This is what's gone over in detail in the apostolic constitutions. It's what's explained in the epistles, but it's not gone over in such great elucidation. It's not explicitly said, these things are no longer, these things you still do, right? But it is gone over in detail in some places that, Father willing, we will cover in the course of time. And we have before, anyone that wants to kind of skip ahead, we've read through the apostolic constitutions, I believe, already on here. If you check the scripture studies, or at least up to book 5, I believe. It was after that I was translating it, or I was going through it, and I was no longer comfortable with some of the stuff. Uh, And at that point, I was not studied enough to do anything but kind of set it aside, put it on the shelf, and say, I don't know enough to have an opinion. I learned later the mingling of the truth that was done in relation to what Rome was trying to accomplish with the Nicolaitan Catholic Christianity. And then those things were making more sense to me. And the reason why Martin Luther burned the apostolic constitutions along with the papal bull that denounced him as a heretic, because it has stuff in it that promotes the things Rome was doing that isn't beneficial. But I encourage everyone with his Ruach in us, if you're familiar with the Bible, there's nothing else you need. That's the plumb line. He says himself, the bones will not be broken. The foundation of what we need to have love in our hearts, to speak truth and kindness, to do these things willingly submissive to his truth, and to ask when we're deficient, it's never been taken. And we can grow from there. That's the whole point. But let's continue. It says, and Yahuwah said to Moshe, say this to the children of Yisrael, you yourselves have seen that I have spoken to you from the Shemayim. You do not make besides me, and that word for me is Aleph, Tau, Yod. He says, you do not make besides me mighty ones of silver, or literally my Aleph, Tau, right? And you do not make mighty ones of gold for yourselves. Make a slaughter place of earth for me, and you shall slaughter on it your ascending offerings, and your shalom offerings, your sheep, and your cattle. Remember, this is like a stamp of who it belongs to. For the whole world is mine and all that fills it. The word, everything was made by the word of his power and sustained and held together by it. And he's claiming ownership. So when you offered a sacrifice, it was really his that he gave you, that you're just giving back to him, right? He says, in every place where I cause my Shem, or my name, to be remembered, I shall come to you and barak you. So just one moment, please. So, and you might want to check this with the Septuagint version. It seems to read a little bit differently here in what it says. I've always taken this to mean wherever he allows literally his name to be remembered, it will be a baraka or a blessing to us. I can't exactly remember the details of how it was worded in the Septuagint. I'm sorry. But we can look really quick right here. That was the wrong version. It Yeah. So it says right here, and you shall make to me an altar of earth, and upon it you shall sacrifice your whole burnt offerings and your shalom offerings and your sheep and your calves in every place where I shall record my name, and I shall come to you and bless you or barak you. So that kind of ties it in with where you're offering your animals at. And originally, if you remember, it was if you're going to offer, build an altar and do it with unhewn stones, not you must offer and it must be in a specific place. So I want you to keep that in mind. It says, wherever you do so, you do it like this. And then after the golden calf, it's you do it here specifically. Boom. And the reason why that was established by Moshe was that he was setting up for them the advent of our Mashiach and what he was going to do on the Passover, where they would all be there and it would happen at that very time in that very place because they caused it to be that way with violating the covenant with the golden calf. But real quick to finish up right here, excuse me. It says, and if you make me a slaughter place of stone, do not build it of cut stone. For if you use your chisel on it, you have profaned it, because you're changing what he has created and called Tov. The same thing is accused, that same principle is used in relation to if a man shaves the corner, or if you shave your beard, for example, you're changing what he's called good, or when a woman puts on makeup, you're changing what he's called Tov. So just something to keep in mind. This says, nor do you go up by steps to my slaughter place, lest your nakedness be exposed on it. Right. And then I mentioned for a second witness, you can compare right here the DSS English Bible, and it has Exodus for you. But we don't need to look at that right now. Although I encourage you, it doesn't have the Hebrew, but it shows you in color coding the words that are different or that are similar in meaning, but different words in the Hebrew. Doesn't really mean much to us as English speaking people. But if you know the Hebrew words are significant, then it definitely has more meaning there. Unfortunately, I don't know of where the DSS English Bible is actually in Hebrew where we can see it for ourselves. If anyone does, I'd greatly appreciate knowing that. So thank you. But meanwhile, we will continue. We're now going on to what was given to Moshe as still on the 15th of the month there, right? This is part of the covenant that he's given that he's going to go recite before them, anoint them, and ratify. But these are the ordinances. It's literally part of what we call the common law that was codified by Alfred the Great in his dooms or judgments under the English common law, that is the foundation for American common law, that was founded or established all the way back in 510 BC, as early as 510 BC, by Molmontis, the Celtic king, who was a Hebrew over in Britain keeping the Torah. And it was some of these very laws that were established as his code or common law for all men in the country there. But it says, these are the ordinances which you shall set before them. If you buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years shall he serve you, and in the seventh year he shall go free for nothing. Now, one thing I want to point out real quick, everything that's in here, there's twofold, it's all showing us what love is. And literally everything in the commandments is to correct a perversion that has already transpired in the world today since creation. So every disobedience and error that was brought in by the adversary that has plagued and riddled men with battle, warfare, lust, uh, with usury, with depriving men of their liberty. every one of them is addressed within the common law and corrected. So when you go through what was in the Bible previously, when we read through the book of Yobelim, when you're going through the accounts of what's in the recognitions that talk about the pre-Diluvian times or things that predate Abraham, uh, you can see the errors that were caused, and then you can come back to the Torah here and find that it was being corrected. It is an amazing thing, but it was literally an answer to every error that was in the world. Not all of them always make sense to people, but I will try to explain it. This isn't about having slaves. If someone had to go into indentured servitude because they couldn't afford something, they went into debt, or they got caught stealing, this is how you would deal with them. They would be a Hebrew servant for 6 years, and in the seventh, they go free for nothing. That's the law. If he should have come in alone, he shall also go forth alone. And if his wife should have gone in together with him, his wife also shall go out, because his wife is his property. I know people might take exception to that, but if you recall, we've already read what happened in the garden. There's a reason things were the way they are established. But a man is given authority or dominion over his wife to help her, not to be a tyrant, just like we don't want tyranny over us, but that's a different thing. It says, moreover, if his master give him a wife, and she have him sons or daughters, the wife and the children shall be his master's, and he shall go forth alone. And if the servant should answer and say, I love my master, my and wife and children, I will not go away free. His master shall bring him to the judgment seat of Elohim. And then, now you see, it says right here, then his Adon shall bring unto him, or unto the Elohim, right? That might have literally been Ha Elohim there in the Hebrew, because we've seen it where it's written the Elohim quite often before here, where it's speaking of our Mashiach and his father. But continuing, it says, his master shall bring him to the judgment seat of Elohim, and then shall he bring him to the door, to the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. And if anyone sell his daughter as a domestic, she shall not depart as the maidservants depart. If she be not pleasing to her master after she has betrothed herself to him, which is how she's supposed to depart. She's not to be sold as a maidservant, but she's supposed to be betrothed as a wife. Okay? It says, if she be not pleasing to her master after she has betrothed herself to him, he shall let her go free, but he is not at liberty to sell her to a foreign nation, because he has trifled with her. And if he should have betrothed her to his son, he shall do to her according to the right of daughters. And if he take another to himself, he shall not deprive her of necessaries and her apparel and her companionship. And if he will not do these things to her, she shall go out free without money. And remember, these things were not established like this because of any benefit or credit for men, but because of the hardness of our hearts, our Creator said. Divorce and all of those things were because of the hardness of our heart. And if you recall, the law as he established it here was due to the reality of what they were living through. He knows everything before it happens. And during the first covenant times, he was going to be divorcing the northern kingdom and sending them away, with the intent of coming and dying and bringing reconciliation for those that were wayward. That was always the plan, right? But while he was in this state, divorce was permissible. After he came and made reconciliation, he changed, or even while before he died, he reestablished what was intended. A man and a woman joined together, and let no man separate what Elohim has joined. If anyone marries a woman or a man who's been separated from their husband or wife, they're an adulterer. These are the facts that they had stated, right? So the other things here you got to keep in mind, what he said when he came was to establish things as they are from that point forward in relation to the truth and how we are to regard him. Just like when he came here, he gave them the truth as they were to regard him as things were. Now he's consistent, he doesn't change. It's always their intent. Like he said from the beginning, it was not so. But he's condescended for our benefit in a great many things. It doesn't make what we do right, but it is explaining why things were allowed for a time. He says, and if any man, sorry about that. Yeah, right here. It says, and if any man smite another and he die, let him be certainly put to death. But as for him that did it not willingly, but Elohim delivered him into his hands, I will give you a place whither the slayer may flee. And if anyone lie in wait for his neighbor to slay him by craft, and he go for refuge, you shall take him from my altar to put him to death. So he says the guilty you don't leave the guilty unpunished, even if they're hanging onto his altar, period. But that's if they're found guilty. If it was not willingly done, he gives a place of refuge to go to. And he gives laws in other places, the details on how these things are to be done. The way we do it now is a trial by jury for everyone. They're innocent until proven guilty. The way it's meant to be under the common law of our country is literally going by how the Bible prescribes, or by his word prescribing things to be done. The fact that it's not and we're following statutes is just indicative to the usurpations happening. But we can get back to this at any time we repent, and that's what he's waiting for. It says, whoever smites his father or his mother, let him be certainly put to death. Whosoever shall steal one of the children of Yisrael and prevail over him and sell him, and he be found with him, let him certainly die. So these are the things, if you're paying attention, in the book of Yahukanon, or the epistle of Yahukanon, it says that we should pray for those sinning a sin not unto death. And when you look throughout the original covenant, these are the ones you see where it says, you certainly die, certainly die. These things that they're doing are certain death penalties that you don't pray for. They have to repent of them, and there's guaranteed consequences for violating these covenant or these instructions. You don't want to do it. All right. It literally will shorten your lifespan to dishonor your parents, for example. It gives you long life to honor them. That is a fact. Just like it gives you long life to be mindful about what you speak, like to be circumspect, and it shortens your life to be a fool. These things are literally written in scripture, and they're literal reality. So it says, and if two men revile each other and smite each other, or and smite the one the other with a stone or his fist, and he die not, but be laid upon his bed, if the man arise and walk abroad on his staff, he that smote him shall be clear, only he shall pay for his loss of time and for his healing. So whatever it costs to heal him and for his time lost at work. And if a man smite his man servant or his maid servant with a rod and die under his hands, he shall be surely punished. But if the servant, right? But if the servant continue to live a day or two, let not be punished, for he is his money. And if two men strive, and smite a woman with child, and her child be born imperfectly formed, he shall be forced to pay a penalty, as the woman's husband may lay upon him. He shall pay with a valuation. But if it be perfectly formed, he shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. And, and this is just talking about the equity of the law. A lot of people think, oh, this is so horrible. But he's trying to say, look, if there's going to be judgment, let it be fair. A man should be punished according to the thing that he does, for equal measure, exactly. And that's gone into detail. That's explicitly said in the Shepherd of Hermas when the shepherd is speaking with Hermas and they're going over why things happen and how long someone is corrected for the things that they do wrong. I highly encourage you guys to check that out. It says, if one smite the eye of his manservant or the eye of his maidservant and put it out, he shall let them go for free for their eyes' sake. And if he should smite out the tooth of his manservant or the tooth of his maidservant, he shall send them away free for their tooth's sake. This is something to keep in mind for those of us that have been in sin, maybe servants of Satan through our actions, not intentional, not nefarious, but because we didn't know better. And we've lost things in the course of being evil, serving him. That is an opportunity under the law here to be at liberty from him and to be let go. And I've had that experience in my life, at least. I've broken teeth by being a servant of evil, and I have come to the truth of that and given liberty through no cost or really effort of my own, but for the sake of my tooth, perhaps, because that is literally how the law works. I'm not trying to be flippant or make it light. I'm trying to tell you, he is so willing to save us for anything that he can. He will use every available means to do so. And if he can break the bonds of oppression on unworthy sinners through a means of how we're afflicted by the adversary, he will do so. And then that's exactly what it says right here. You can find other injunctions like this elsewhere, but it's why those that are poor and afflicted are looked upon by him, right? Those that are being accosted by the adversary are comforted by him. But you have to have done wrong to get that way. I'm sure you guys realize these things, right? Most people, we might overlook it, or you might see this stuff and not quite see the good news in it. But it is here, or the Basora, if you will. It says, and if a bull gore a man or woman and they die, the bull shall be stoned with stones, and his flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the bull shall be clear. But if the bull should have been given to goring in former time, and men should have told his owner, and he have not removed him, but he should have slain a man or woman, the bull shall be stoned, and his owner shall also, or shall die also. Now, think about how this is in relation to men and how we treat one another, and if we cause someone to stumble, right? Because it's not about oxen and treading out grain, that the application is literally about oxen, but it's spiritually about men. The same is true for all of these things. It's the equity of the law here that we are to make applicable in every situation. That's how the common law is applied in our own times in a variety of ways. It says, and if a ransom should be imposed on him, he shall pay for the ransom of his soul as much as they shall lay upon him. And if the bull gore a son or daughter, let them do to him according to this ordinance. And if the bull gore a manservant or maidservant, he shall pay to their master 30 silver drachms, right, or pieces of silver, and the bull shall be stoned. Right there is the price of a servant in the Torah, where that 30 pieces of silver came from, by the way, right? And if anyone open a pit or dig a cavity in stone and cover it not, and an ox or a donkey fall in there, the owner of the pit shall make compensation and shall give money to the owner, and the dead shall be his own. And if any man, so you see, if someone causes a problem, they have to make restitution. It's very simple. They pay for the what was there, and the debt is now their own. Right. And if any man now, and I just want to make a premise there. On the flip side, you could be the owner of the animal, and you could just choose not to be upset and to take the dead animal and use it for your own purposes. That would be because you're righteous and you're choosing not to be offensive. That is love going beyond what is in the bonds of Torah, which is explained by Shaul. Anytime love can supersede these injunctions, there's a chance for it's beyond what the Torah enjoins. There is no law against it, period. So a man not wanting to take his wife and accuse her of adultery because he doesn't have a spirit of jealousy can put her away secretly because he doesn't have two witnesses to the thing and he's righteous, like what Yahusef was trying to do with Miriam, if you recall. So that's going beyond the Torah. That's not breaking it. That's love going beyond the bounds of what is must do in Torah. Love supersedes. Okay. He did not have jealous ruach in him. There was no two witnesses to convict and cause to be stoned. It was not in his nature to be vindictive. He just wanted to let her go because he was righteous. And that was accounted to him for righteousness because he was humble. Something for us to keep in mind, right? This is, and if any man's bull gore the bull of his neighbor and it die, they shall sell the living bull and divide the money, and they shall divide the dead bull. But if the bull be known to have been given to the goring, or to been given to goring in time past, and they have testified to his owner, and he have not removed him, he shall repay bull for bull, but the dead shall be his own. And if one steal an ox or a sheep, and kill it or sell it, he shall pay 5 calves for a calf, and 4 sheep for a sheep. Now, you got to look at why you think that would be. The value of 1 calf being for 5 and the value of 4 sheep being for 1 sheep. I'm sure there's principles behind that other than monetary value. There might be something else inclined to that. What you do with it, like if you killed and ate it, or if you killed and sold it, it's not just you that's now culpable, but you've also given someone else to be guilty. And there's other things that it has cost in the form of sin. And you're having to pay restitution with so many might be trying to account for the cost of all of it because you were the offensive party to begin it. Whether that's the exact truth or the nuances behind it, I can't say definitively, but we can infer things from his word. We just can't be dogmatic about things that aren't plainly written. It says, and if the thief be found in the breach and be smitten and die, there shall not be blood shed for him. But if the sun be risen upon him, he is guilty, he shall die instead. And if a thief have nothing, let him be sold in compensation for what he has stolen. So that's a whole bunch of instructions all together there, but he's basically going over the restitution for what happens if you steal different things, and then if a thief dies in the act of doing it in the middle of the night, you kill him while you don't see what's going on because you don't know what's going on. You're not a culpable for that. But if the sun's risen, you realize it's just a thief and you kill the man, then you're guilty. You catch him instead. If he's caught and the thief himself has nothing, like you can't make restitution by making payment for what he's stolen, let him be sold in compensation for what he's stolen. And that goes back to what we just read when you buy a Hebrew servant, right? So that was the instruction for that before you got to it there. And this is kind of reiterating what would cause that. Another thing would be going into debt for business means or whatever. And if the thing stolen be left and be in his hand alive, whether ox or sheep, he shall restore them twofold. So if it's killed or sold, it's four. If it's not, it's double. You just restore, you do to them what he did to another. You take the thing that he's took, but no one else was culpable. No one else is having to, or there's no more extra payment, right? It says, and if anyone should feed down a field or a vineyard, and should send in his beast to feed down another field, he shall make compensation of his own field according to his produce. And if he shall have fed down the whole field, he shall pay for compensation the best of his own field to the best of his vineyard. And if fire have gone forth and caught thorns, and should also set on fire threshing floors or ears of corn or a field, he that kindled the fire shall make compensation. This is the law. The guilty party pays, and you make restitution to the victims, not, you don't pay a fine to the state, and it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's you restore the thing that you violated. This is the common law, but this is what we've gotten away from, if you guys pay attention to what's going on today. It says, and if anyone give to his neighbor money or goods to keep, and they be stolen out of the man's house, if the thief be found, he shall repay double. But if the thief be not found, the master of the house shall come forward before Elohim and shall swear that surely he has not wrought wickedly in regard of any part of his neighbor's deposit, according to every injury alleged, both concerning a calf and a donkey and a sheep and a garment and every alleged loss, whatsoever in fact it may be. The judgment of both shall proceed before Elohim, and he that is convicted by Elohim shall repay to his neighbor double. And if anyone give to his neighbor to keep a calf or sheep or any beast, and it be wounded or die or be taken, and no one know, an oath of Elohim shall be between both, that he has surely not at all been guilty in the matter of his neighbor's deposit, and so his master shall hold him guiltless, and he shall not make compensation. Now, an oath before the king is certain, and if you make an oath unworthily, you'd be paying the price. This is what people don't realize. They're flippant about things they swear, and then they have problems in their life. But there will be a price to pay for every violation of an oath or vow. Doesn't matter if you change your mind, you've already made it. For anyone who doubts that, just look at Kings and Chronicles. Pay attention to, in particular, the times around Nebuchadnezzar messing with the southern kingdom of Yahudah. The southern kings were making covenants with the king of Babylon, with the king of Egypt, but they were making vows and then breaking them, and then you can see what happened to them. Nothing will ever benefit someone who breaks a vow, and this includes everyone that swears an oath to the Constitution, for example. That is an oath to uphold the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution under the common law, right? Right. It says, and if it be stolen from him, he shall make compensation to the owner. Meaning that if he's not willing to make that vow, if it was nefarious or whatever, then the one that you gave it to in trust has to pay. It says, and if it be seized of beast, he shall bring him to the prey, and he shall not make compensation. So if it's stolen and it wasn't his fault, or if it was killed by wild beasts, these are things outside of that man's control, something that our Creator allowed to happen to that man's possessions while it was in the possession of another. But that the one that was holding it had no direct responsibility. He's not held accountable. This is just common sense, but this is what it's trying to go over right here. It says, and if it be seized of beast, he shall bring it to him the prey, and he shall not make compensation. And if anyone borrow of his neighbor, and it be wounded or die, or be carried away, and the owner of it be not with it, he shall make compensation. But if the owner be with it, he shall not make compensation. But if it be a hired thing, there shall be to him instead of the hire. Now that's saying if you borrow your friend's ox and you kill it in the process of using it, you have to repay him. If the owner is with it and you're using it there and it dies and the owner is there, it died under his own hand. If you hire it from him and it dies in the course of being your hire, you've paid for its uses. There's no requirement to compensate him. So these are common sense things. All of this is part of contract law today if you do things properly. It says, but if the owner be with it, he shall not make compensation, but if it be a hired thing, there shall be to him instead of his hire. And if anyone deceive a virgin that is not betrothed and lie with her, he shall surely endow her for a wife to himself. And if her father positively refuse, he will not consent to give her to him for a wife, he shall pay compensation to her father according to the amount of the dowry of virgins. Now, a lot of people take offense at this, thinking that it's talking about if someone rapes a virgin, but there's already laws that we'll see about what happens if someone rapes another. This isn't in regard to that. This is if two join together before doing it in a lawful manner, like the man going to the father and making an agreement for his daughter or future wife there. If you do something like that, it mentioned in another place that when you do that, you cannot leave that woman. You must stay with her and you cannot put her away. So it's something to keep in mind there. A lot of people will have that translated like if you rape a woman, you have to marry her. That's not what it's saying. So just please bear with me. And for any of these things, I really encourage you, if you're not certain, don't look at commentaries, but go to the interlinear. Go to the Strong's Concordance, look up the Greek if you're in the Septuagint version, and get to the original meanings of the words so that you can see the context of them yourself, and then you'll know. It says, you shall not save the lives of witches. It says sorcerers here. I don't know why they use different words here. Right here it says witch, right? Kasaf, but it's to practice magic or to incant, if you will. Sorcerers are a little different. Pharmakia is sorcery, and pharmakia is like the concocting things with drugs. Easiest way to put it. Witch's brews is what you'd put, right? But not quite the same as witchcraft. It says, every one that lies with a beast you shall surely put to death. He that sacrifices to any mighty ones, but to Yahuwah only, shall be destroyed by death. I think that other one says shall be utterly destroyed or put under the ban, right? And that is offering sacrifices, whether it's physical animal sacrifices or it's offerings of praise, right? It's to Yahuwah only that we ought to. I'm very grateful, however, that he said that all sins and blasphemies against the son of Adam shall be forgiven. Right? It says, and you shall not hurt a stranger, nor afflict him, for you were strangers in the land of Mitzrayim or Egypt. You shall hurt no widow or orphan. because we were orphans and a widow. If you think about how history has played out with our people, right? Just like we were strangers in a foreign land. And if you should afflict them by ill treatment, and they should cry aloud to me, I will surely hear their voice, and I will be very angry, and will slay you with the sword, and your wives shall be widows, and your children orphans. And if you should lend money to your poor brother who is by you, you shall not be hard upon him, you shall not exact usury of him. And that's interest for anyone that wants to know. Charging interest with money is a direct sin. And if you take, we're not to do it to our neighbors or our brethren. It's not supposed to be done in our country, really. But that's a different thing. It says, and if you take your neighbor's garment for a pledge, you shall restore it to him before sunset. For this is his clothing, this is the only covering of his nakedness, wherein shall he sleep. If then he shall cry to me, I will hearken to him, for I am merciful. You shall not revile the mighty ones, nor speak the Elohim, nor speak ill of the ruler of your people, the judges of your people, right? Or the Neshim, or Nesha, sorry. That is the princes. And that it's also, I believe that is similar to the word for eagle. But anyways, this is the word where he calls judges or rulers like Elohim. Or he says, haven't I said you are Elohim and all of you are sons of the Most High? Our Mashiach quotes, and that's also a psalm in, I believe, chapter 82 of the Psalms. Just different ways of talking about the use of this word. There is only one true Elohim, the Father, and then there are those that are made Elohim because they're sent by him as a representative, in which our Mashiach is the literal embodiment of that. And our Mashiach, as he saw, he also did by sending Moshe to be like an Elohim, just like he was sent to be like an Elohim. And then he mentions there that the judges over the people were like an Elohim. And here you can see it again here. That definition is explained in detail. Every use of Elohim for the only true Elohim, for those that are sent by him, and then for those that are like the false idols and also the messengers that are over the nations that are equated to Elohim but are not. They're all addressed by Kepha in what's called the recognitions of Clement. It says, you shall not keep back the first fruits of your threshing floor and press. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. You shall do with your calf and your sheep and your donkey, or so shall you do with your calf and your sheep and your donkey. 7 days shall it be under the mother, and the 8th day you shall give it to me. And you shall be a set apart min to me, and you shall not eat flesh taken of beasts, you shall cast it to the dog. That's anything that was killed by an animal at that time. Another part mentions if it dies of itself, right? Later on, and here's the distinction, this was the original covenant, his people. Every firstborn that opens the womb was to be his as a Kohen, and the animals were to be done in this manner. And none of his people were to eat animals that were killed by beasts. Later on, after the golden calf incident, you have instructions that give what to do if an animal is killed, and they can eat it, or they can give the ones that die of themselves, they can give to the nations about them, but they're not supposed to. Now, the sons of Aharon are told not to touch or eat those things at all, but it can be the others that are allowed to, because they were rejected as being Kohanim to him after the golden calf. So there's a difference in the law just right here that most people don't quite see because of the way that this stuff is mixed up. And I'm really sorry, I forgot to mention, we had gone over it, I believe, last week too. But I had found out previous to this time, as well as another brother, Scott Whitman, possibly others, that the book of Exodus, among other books, are kind of out of order. And we'd readdressed that, I believe, last week. But just for anyone that wants to know, the proper order for chronological order for the books here is chapters 1 through 17. And then you skip and you go from 19 through 24. Then you go back to chapter 18, and then you jump ahead from there from 31 to 34. Then you go back from 25 to 30, I believe. And then you go to the end, you finish 35 to 40. Might be a little off on that. I'll put the order in the description just to make sure I have it right. Sister Cindy helped me with that one. The one thing I was not familiar with there was where chapter 18 was placed. Brother Scott Whitman had shared that with her. And then if you read it in context, it seems to fit better. So I thank him for that. And anyone else, please check out that order, read it, and see the way that it was supposed to flow through there. But I'm just trying to show you that some of the laws and statutes were changed after the golden calf incident because they were no longer being handled in the same manner. It was added bonds because of transgression. The firstborn were now replaced with the sons of Louis in substitute for them, which the sons of Louis were already the Kohanim previous to that, but this was a type that was reiterated. If you remember, we had mentioned it a few weeks ago that it was like a type of the renewed covenant that they were getting here, but then it reverted back to what they originally had until he actually came again. So this was like an echo, if you will. But the last one here, all right, sorry, I believe we have two more. It would be this one and then chapter 24 here. Yes, we'll see about getting through that right now. It says, you shall not receive a vain report. You shall not agree with an unrighteous witness or man to become an unrighteous witness. You shall not associate with the multitude for evil. You shall not join yourselves with a multitude to turn aside with the majority, so as to shut out judgment. Now, I shared this a few years ago. I don't know if I did it with the group here or anything, but if you take this particular section of the law and you go through the account of how they treated our Mashiach, they literally violate every precept that's all right here. They went along with the crowd to do evil. They're unrighteous witnesses. Every one of it, they fulfilled in how they were attacking our Mashiach as an innocent man. I'm doing air quotes when I'm saying that. But for the purposes of what it is, he was a perfect man. He was innocent, and they were violating the law in doing all these things to him. And you shall not spare a poor man in judgment. And if you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey going astray, you shall turn them back and restore them to him. And if you see your enemy's donkey fallen under its burden, you shall not pass by it, but shall help to raise it with him. You shall not wrest the sentence of the poor in his judgment. You shall abstain from every unrighteous thing. You shall not slay the innocent and righteous. You shall not justify the wicked for gifts. And you shall not receive gifts, for gifts blind the eyes of the seeing and corrupt righteous words. And you shall not afflict a stranger, for you know the heart of a stranger. Excuse me. For you yourselves were for you were yourselves strangers in the land of Mizraim or Mitzrayim, Egypt. 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in the fruits of it. But in the 7th year you shall let it rest and leave it, and the poor of your nation shall feed, and the wild beasts of the field shall eat that which remains. Thus shall you do to your vineyard and to your olive yard. 6 days shall you do your works, And on the seventh day there shall be rest, that your ox and your donkey may rest, and that your son and your maid servant and the stranger may be refreshed. Observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you, and you shall make no mention of the name of other mighty ones, neither shall they be heard out of your mouth. Keep you a feast to me 3 times in a year. And that's that 3 times you keep the feast is the regalim, the hagag, or that hog, and then I don't know if it has right here. Yeah, it doesn't say it right here. It does mention it that these are the 3 regalim, or the regalim. It's the 3 feasts where they walk to Yerushalayim, or they do the Aliyah, they call it today. But in the Hebrew here, it's the regel, the resh gimel lamed, and it's the word that we get for the regalia, regulations, a whole bunch of different roots in the English there, but it has to do with royalty as well. For the king to put his foot, regal, on the throat or neck of his enemy was what was pictured, and part of that too. But I'm getting sidetracked there. The point was, it's the 3 feasts of the 3 that you put your foot to coming up to the land. It mentions as the regel, or it's your regalia, the things that are part of the regular form of worship that you do. He goes, take heed to keep the feast of unleavened bread. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, as I charge you at the season of the month of Abib, or it says new corn, right? But that's Abib. For in it you came out of Mitzrayim. You shall not appear before me empty. And you shall keep the feast of the harvest of first fruits of your labors, whatsoever you shall have sown in your field, and the feast of the completion at the end of the year in the gathering in of your fruits out of the field. 3 times in the year shall all your males appear before Yahuwah your Elohim. Yeah. For when I shall have cast out the nations from before you, and shall have widened your borders, you shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leaven, neither must the fat of my feast abide till the morning. You shall bring the first offerings of the first fruits of your land into my house, into the house of Yahuwah your Elohim. You shall not see the lamb in its mother's milk. That is gone over in more detail in the Dead Sea Scrolls too, but it's made, people make it so you can't eat a burger with cheese, for example, but that's not what it says here. It's adding to his word when you do such a thing. It says, and behold, I send my messenger before your face, that he may keep you in the way, that he may bring you into the land which I have prepared for you. Take heed to yourself and hearken to him and disobey him not, for he will not give way to you, for my name is on him. It says on him right here. This one says in him, Kareb, right? Or nearest center. Literally, it's like in him. But this one says on. And that is speaking of the messenger Yahuwah, who is our Mashiach, that the Father speaks through when he's the only mediator between man and men, or Elohim and men, right? It's the one who's speaking to the children in Bokim and the book of Judges where they're crying. And that is our Mashiach as well here. It says, if you will indeed hear my voice, and if you will do all things I shall charge you with, and keep my covenant, You shall be to me a peculiar people above all nations, for the whole world, the whole earth is mine. And you shall be to me a royal kahuna, so kings and kohanim, right? The same thing that was enjoined and given in Revelation during the millennial reign as the culmination of this covenant. And a Kodesh nation. These words shall you speak to the children of Yisrael, if you shall indeed hear my voice and do all the things I shall tell you. I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. For my messenger shall go as your leader and shall bring you to the Amorite, the Hittite, and Pezerite, and Canaanite, and Girgashite, and Hivite, and Jebusite, and I will destroy them. And you shall not worship their Elohim, or their mighty ones, nor serve them, which are different aspects of Nimrod worship. We'll discover that in the course of time. But all of their holidays and all the things they did was to venerate the first anti-Mashiach and to celebrate the appointed times of Satan. It says, you shall not worship their mighty ones, nor serve them. You shall not do according to their works, but shall utterly destroy them and break down their pillars. And you shall serve Yahuwah your Elohim, and I will barak your bread and your wine and your water, and I will turn away sickness from you. There shall not be on your land one that is impotent or barren. I will surely fulfill the number of your days, and I will send a terror before you, and I will strike with amazement all the nations to which you shall come, and I will make all your enemies to flee. And I will send hornets before you, and you shall cast out the Amorites and the Hittites and the Hivites rather, and the Canaanites and the Hittites from you. I will not cast them out in 1 year, lest the land become desolate, and the beasts of the field multiply against you. By little I will cast them out before you, until you shall be increased and inherit the earth. And I will set your borders from the Reed Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness to the great river Euphrates. And I will give into your hand those that dwell in the land, and will cast them out from you. You shall make no covenant with them and their mighty ones. Making a covenant usually is swearing oaths, and you had to swear an oath to the mighty ones of whoever you were making a covenant with. That's something that we cannot do. And if you have to make an oath, if you have to make a vow, like if you're in the military or if you're in public service in our country, you are required to make a vow. If you were to be a teacher of the people, entrusted with the words that were given by Kepha, you had to make an adjuration, which is like a vow, to be obedient to the one that gave you the scrolls and all things. It was something that you had to do in the apostolic constitutions. And yes, our Mashiach says, let your yes be yes and your no be no, and whatever is beyond these is from the evil one. That is a truth in relation to things that were going to happen later. The idea of vows and secret societies and imposed restrictions that men have to vow to uphold are done by every Catholic priest yearly. Those are the things, and by every secret society, those are the things that are being enjoined against. People that are being given positions of trust over children in truth, they are given to make adjurations or vows to be in service to others. And that's something there's nothing satanic about that unless you violate it. And then you only have yourself to blame. But the reason for that, you can look at all the writings of the founders. They knew and they feared their maker, and they knew that anyone that feared their maker and made that vow would keep it. Because if you didn't, you would definitely suffer for violating it, because they knew that it was serious business. So those are why public servants they're swear an oath to the Constitution in our country, if you will. And that is a vow that everyone that does so must keep, because the Constitution upholds the common law. The common law is Scripture. I've been trying to tell you that, and I will share it with you again today. But um, there's a few different writings on the topic. The one I have in mind is a PDF that was about Alfred the Great and the common law as codified by him. It predates him there, but that is in plain English for anyone to see, that it's literally the Ten Commandments. And right here, what we're reading, chapters 20 through 23 of these rules and ordinances, this is the common law. It is the foundation of all law in our country, and it's straight from what we call the Bible. It says, and they shall not dwell in your land, lest they cause you to sin against me. For if you should serve their Elohim, their mighty ones, these will be an offense to you. And here's the last one for now. And it says, and to Moshe he said, go up to Yahuwah, you and Aharon and Nadab and Abihu and 70 of the elders of Yisrael, and they shall worship Yahuwah from a distance. And Moshe alone shall draw nigh to Elohim, and they shall not draw nigh, and the people shall not come up with them. And Moshe went in and related to the people all the words of Elohim and the ordinances. And all the people answered with one voice, and this is the third time they've done it. All the words which Yahuwah has spoken, we will do and be obedient. And Moshe wrote all the words of Yahuwah. And Moshe rose up early in the morning and built an altar under the mountain and set 12 stones for the 12 tribes of Yisrael. And he sent forth the young men to the, see, this is where the young men, not the sons of Louis, were acting as Kohanim, according to what was just enjoined, the firstborn that opens the womb. Okay? And he sent forth the young men of the children of Yisrael, and they offered whole burnt offerings, and they sacrificed young calves as a shalom offering to Elohim. And Moshe took half the blood and poured it into bowls, and half the blood he poured out upon the altar. And he took the book of the covenant, and sorry, this is going to be the third time, right? He read it twice, and they said twice, and this is the third. And remember, at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses confirms every matter, and this is how they first took him on and took on the covenant and accepted him. And later on, when he came in the flesh, they rejected him 3 times, and they said, we have no king but Caesar. And that's what they got until they say, Baruch haba b'shem Yahuwah, blessed is he who is coming in the name of Yahuwah. It says, and Moshe wrote all the words of Yahuwah, and Moshe rose up early in the morning and built an altar under the mountain and set up 12 stones for the 12 tribes of Yisrael. And he sent forth the young men of the children of Yisrael, and they offered whole burnt offerings, and they sacrificed the young calves as a shalom offering to Elohim. And Moshe took half the blood. I'm sorry, I'm rereading it, right? And he poured it into bowls, and half the blood he poured out upon the altar. And he took the book of the covenant, and he read it in the ears of the people. And they said, all things whatsoever Yahuwah has spoken, we will do and hearken therein. And Moshe took the blood and sprinkled it upon the people, and said, behold, the blood of the covenant, which Yahuwah has made with you concerning all these words. The covenant was ratified by blood, and that's the very thing that our Mashiach did in the flesh when he was reinstituting the renewed covenant, and he literally anointed the most kadosh with his own blood at that time, as made known by Ron Wyatt and others. There's a really great book about the Ark of the Covenant that was written by a gentleman who was investigating the things that Ron Wyatt was looking into. I'll get the title for you because I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's another witness to what Ron Wyatt found. He's a completely separate author, gives you insights into it, as well as some, I mean, if you pay attention to what's written in there, you can learn a great deal about its general location. Um, I won't go any further than that, but I will put the book in the description because I don't know the title off the top of my head. I believe it's called The Ark of the Covenant, but I don't know the author. Either way, let's go ahead and finish real quick here. This is the part, just like our Mashiach ate and dined with his 12 and the 70, right? Where he had a meal with them and he spoke with them. He's doing so with the people back in this time, with the elders and his chosen ones. This is a Moshe. I read that one. And Moshe took the blood and sprinkled it upon the people. And he said, Behold, the blood of the covenant, which Yahuwah has made with you concerning all these words. And Moshe went up, and Aharon, and Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Yisrael. And they saw the place where the El of Yisrael stood. This would be our Mashiach, because the Father is not confined to a body. He's not seen by men, right? And under his feet was as it were a work of sapphire slabs, and as it were the appearance of the firmament of Shamayim in its purity. So they were seeing what looked like a vision of him in the firmament with it under his feet like sapphire slabs or stone. And if you've ever seen what's sky ice, it looks just like sapphire stone, very deep blue. And of the chosen ones of Yisrael, there was not even one missing. And they appeared in the place of Elohim and did eat and drink. There's a parable for you, I'm sure you can see. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, Come up to me into the mountain and be there, and I will give you the tables of stone, the law and the commandments which I have written to give them laws. And Moshe rose up, and Yahushua his attendant, and went up into the mountain, or the mount of Elohim. And to the elders they said, Rest there till we return to you. And behold, Aharon and Hur are with you. If any man have a cause to be tried, let them go to them. And Moshe and Yahushua went up to the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. And the esteem of Elohim, or Yahuwah, and the kabod Yahuwah is what it says literally, right? The word of is added there. But the kabod Yahuwah came down upon Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And Yahuwah called Moshe on the 7th day out of the midst of the cloud. And the appearance of the esteem of Yahuwah was as burning fire on the top of the mountain before the children of Yisrael. And Moshe went up into the midst of the cloud, and went up to the mountain, and was there in the mountain 40 days and 40 nights, which will take us into the beginning of the book of Yobelim, starting next week, when we continue this, ob willing. But until then, after we get through that, we will come back and continue with our reading of Exodus. I encourage all of you, if you want, read through the order that we gave, so you can see it as a natural flowing event. But what we're going to be reading is in the line of this. It's just going to be the period of while the children were waiting during that first 40 days. You can see they were already given the common law. It was not just the 10 Commandments, but it was the original covenant right there with all the ordinances and everything included. Although the dietary instructions are not here, you notice. The instructions on what a man should wear and shave, or how you should shave or not shave, how you should cut your hair, the keeping of all the festivals, none of that is right here. That is not inducive to the common law as it will per se, but that is things that are required for believers that want to be in covenant. the dietary laws, and the feasts. So there is a little more involved with it, and that is also explained in the apostolic constitutions. You don't just have to take my word for it. These are things that I'm not just making up, but it's literally explained to us in other writings. We just haven't got to them yet. So I'm kind of opening it up before we get there. Either way, Father willing, this has been edifying for you all, and we can learn something that's worthwhile. You guys have a great Sabbath, a great week ahead. So Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov. We will talk to you next week. Shalom.